Good morning, everybody. I hope the audio is clear and screen is clearly visible. Can we start?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we already started with the profits and gains from business or profession, and we already had one lecture. In that we had discussed the background material, like what is the definition of the word business, what do you understand by profession, what is understood by vocation. We also discussed some broad principles when we compute the income from business. Then we discussed about section 28 that spells out the scope of income under the head income from business or profession. And after that, we started off with the deductions available from business income while computing income from business. And I believe we discussed about section 30. We have discussed about section 31 also. Both these sections are done. Then some of the subsections on sections 36, these also we concluded and discussed last time. And we were on depreciation, if I remember it correctly. And from there, we have to take it further. So as far as depreciation is concerned, few things we discussed last time, like ownership of the asset is mandatory. And when you claim the depreciation, it is also necessary that the asset should be used for business or profession, which is carried out by the assessee. So ownership of the asset and use of the asset for business or profession are the mandatory requirements. Then we also refer to tangible and intangible assets which are eligible for depreciation. As per the income tax provisions, the assets are classified as building, plant, machinery, furniture, or other specified intangible assets. And only if the assets are falling within these groups of assets, it is eligible for depreciation. Then the method of depreciation is only written down value method, specified rates as per the income tax rules. Only in case of power sector companies, they have a choice to follow straight line method of depreciation. Then we discussed about the concept of block of asset. The definition of block of asset says it's a group of assets falling within the same class of assets for which the same rate of depreciation has been prescribed. So we are basically grouping the assets together, firstly by the nature of assets. So thereby we group the assets as building, plant, machinery, furniture, and intangible assets. So within any group, depending on the nature of asset, it will have to be classified. And then there is a further classification within the group, and then we can call it as block of asset. The further round of classification happens on the rate of depreciation. So those assets which are falling in the same block and have the same rate of depreciation will be pulled together to create a block of asset. And once the asset goes into the block of assets, it will lose its individual identity. So there is no specific identity for the asset once the asset is included within the block of asset. And now we can start off with the method of calculation of depreciation. Now the method of calculation of depreciation in income tax is entirely different than what we ordinarily calculate for the purpose of financial statements. So this is entirely different method of depreciation that we have to follow here. Now we will see in next slide how that depreciation calculation has to be done. Then there is also concept of pro rata depreciation, but that is also different from normal pro rata calculation which we do in Companies Act or which we do for financial statements, etc. Here the concept is slightly different. So we will see those things also. So let us understand how the depreciation is calculated. For each block of asset, we take the opening WDV at the beginning of the year. On 1st April, whatever is the WDV carried forward from the earlier year, that has to be considered. Then we add cost of additions during the year. So if you have purchased any assets during the year, the cost of these assets will be added over here. Now, when we add these costs, this cost of assets, that there are a couple of things like this should be the cost to the assessee. So what cost the assessee has incurred, that will have to be added over here. If some portion of cost is made by somebody else, is borne by somebody else, then that cannot be capitalized over here. So cost of addition of fixed assets in this block purchased during the year, acquired during the year, which are put to use, which are already used by the assessee in the current year, that will be added over here. Then if there is any sale of asset which falls within this block, then those sales proceeds should be reduced. So in case you have any asset which is falling within this block, and if it is sold during the year, the entire sales value has to be reduced from this block of asset. And then we derive this subtotal. After deriving subtotal, we have to calculate the depreciation. But before you calculate depreciation, you need to confirm couple of things. One important thing is you can calculate the depreciation only if this subtotal is a positive number. If this subtotal is a negative number, then you are not eligible to claim a depreciation. If it is a negative number, it represents a surplus. It represents a gain because you are reducing the sales proceeds of the asset, and therefore it is showing the gain in that particular block. This gain or profit is liable for tax as short-term capital gain by virtue of section 50. So after you derive subtotal, first thing you need to confirm is whether it is a positive number or a negative number. If it is a positive number, then you need to confirm one more condition before you calculate depreciation. And if it is a negative number, then it represents a surplus, and that surplus is taxable as income from short-term capital gain under the provisions of section 50. Now suppose this subtotal is a positive. Then one more condition is there should be at least one asset left in the block. See, when you think of a block of asset, it comprises of several assets. For example, a block of building, let's say 10% depreciation, factory buildings are falling within 10% rate of depreciation. You may have multiples of factory building, A, B, C, D. There could be 4 or 10 factory buildings which will fall within that particular block. Likewise, for machinery, where the common rate of depreciation is 15%, you may have more than one machinery which will fall within the block. So whenever you are calculating the depreciation and the subtotal is positive, you have to ensure that there is at least one asset in existence in that particular block. In other words, if there is no asset in existence, if all of them are disposed of or sold, and if you still have a positive amount there, then you cannot claim the depreciation. So in order to claim the depreciation, after you derive this subtotal, you must satisfy two conditions. The conditions are subtotal should be positive and there should be at least one asset left in the block. Then only you can calculate and claim depreciation. If it is negative, then I told you that it will be liable for tax as a surplus under the head income from capital gains, short-term capital gains by virtue of section 50. Then at the time of calculating depreciation, we have to follow the rates provided by income tax rules. So for different blocks of assets, different rates are prescribed. Now when you apply these rates, there is a concept of pro rata depreciation for the newly purchased assets in a particular block. So suppose if in a particular block, let's say block of machinery, you have some newly purchased asset or machinery, then you have to check whether the newly purchased asset is used for more than 180 days, then you will apply the normal rate of depreciation. If it is used for less than that, then it will be 50% of the normal rate of depreciation. So in other words, if the newly purchased asset is used for more than 180 days, then normal rate of depreciation will apply. Otherwise, 50% of normal rate of depreciation will apply. Just to give you an example, suppose you have a block of machinery. You have opening WDV and there are some additions during the year. Normal rate of depreciation on machinery is 15%. There is no sale. Okay, so you have some opening balance and you purchased two machineries during the year. One machine was purchased in, let's say, August. Let's take a financial year 1920. So one machine was purchased in August 2019 and it was immediately put to use. You started using it for your business or profession. The second machine was purchased in Jan 2020, and again it was immediately used for business or profession. It was immediately put to use for business or profession. So how do we calculate the depreciation? We take the opening WDV of this block and then we add additions during the year. But within the additions, there are two machines. One is in August 2019, which is used for more than 180 days. And the second one is purchased, installed, and you started using it from January 20, which is used for less than 180 days. So on opening balance and the addition which was made in August 2019, the normal rate of depreciation, that is 15% depreciation, will apply. Whereas if you purchase the asset in January 20, then for that particular year, the asset is used for less than 180 days. So only 7.5% rate will apply when you calculate the depreciation. This will happen only in the year of purchase, not subsequently. Subsequently, these assets will be eligible for normal rate of depreciation. Only in the year of purchase, you have to be little careful and see what is the date of purchase. Based on that, you have to find out whether the asset is used for more than 180 days. And if it is so, then you claim the normal depreciation. Otherwise, it will be 50% of the normal rate of depreciation. So this is how we calculate the depreciation for the year. And if you reduce the depreciation from subtotal, you will have the written down value at the end of the year that will be carried forward to the next year. Have you understood the framework for calculation of depreciation? Yes. Have you understood the concept of?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, no difficulty in calculations, calculation methodologies. Okay.
No, sir.
So this is how we need to calculate the depreciation. This is a completely different method that we follow in income tax for calculation of depreciation as compared to financial statements. In financial statements, we usually do it on item to item basis. For each item, we calculate the depreciation separately because each item has a separate identity when you maintain the fixed asset register, etc. for the purpose of financial statements. But here it is not so. It's a block of asset, and this is the prescribed methodology for calculation of depreciation. So having understood the calculation of depreciation, the methodology and other things, we go to the next set of sections, next set of deductions. And the next set of deduction is a general deduction available under section 37 subsection 1. So see the scheme of deductions, section 30, 31, then section 36. It refers to few specific items of expenditure. But apart from that, you will have several other items of expenditure in your profit and loss account. Some of them are covered in 30 to 36, but many of them may not find a place in 30 to 36. But eventually, those are the expenses incurred for business or profession. So whether we can claim those expenses, that answer is given by general deduction under section 37(1). So if you want to claim any other expense which is incurred by you for business or profession, then you need to refer to the provisions of 37(1). Before claiming a deduction under section 37(1), certain conditions are to be satisfied, and all of them are to be satisfied. The first condition is that the expenditure should not be covered by section 30 to 36. In other words, if an expenditure is specifically governed by section 30 to 36, any relevant section, then you cannot claim that as a deduction under section 37(1). It has to be an exclusive item which is not governed by, which is not covered by section 30 to section 36. Then only it will be covered within the meaning of, within the provisions of section 37 subsection 1. Secondly, it should not be a capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is not allowed as a deduction. Thirdly, it should not be a personal expenditure. The personal expenditure is not allowed as deduction. It is only the business related expenditure that will be allowed as a deduction. So if you are referring to any personal expenditure of the SEC, then such expenditure cannot be claimed. The fourth condition, expenditure should be incurred during the previous year. So there has to be a nexus between the expenditure and the previous year, activities in the previous year. Only if the expenditure is incurred in the previous year, it should be allowed as a deduction. The next condition is it should be incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of business or profession. This is very important condition. The two words are exclusively. The word wholly refers to the quantum of expenditure, the amount of expenditure, the whole of it, the entire amount should be for the purpose of business or a profession. And exclusively refers to the purpose of expenditure. It should be exclusively for the purpose of business or a profession. So very important words, wholly and exclusively, that the expenditure has to be incurred wholly, that means the total quantum, and exclusively, that means the purpose should be for business or profession. And the last condition, again a very important condition, it should not be prohibited by law. That means the payment of these expenses is not prohibited by any law. It is not illegal in accordance with any law. Then and then only one can claim the expenditure as a deduction under section 37(1). And all these conditions are to be satisfied. It's not just one or two conditions what we are looking at over here. All of them have to be satisfied in order to claim a deduction under section 37(1). Now let us take some examples and see how the expenditure is covered by section 37(1). Just recall your profit and loss account. Okay. Now in profit and loss account, we have a heading called as consumption of materials or cost of goods sold. So let us analyze this on the background of these conditions. In section 30 to 36, did we have any reference to materials used, cost of goods sold, etc.? Did we have any reference to that? Section 30 to 36. Yes. Did we have any item of that kind? Raw material consumption, cost of goods sold? It was not there, right? So such expenditure is not covered by section 30 to 36. It is not a capital expenditure. It is not a personal expenditure. It is incurred during the previous year, and it is wholly and exclusively for business. And purchase of raw material, use of raw material, consumption of finished goods is not prohibited by law. So it meets all the conditions. So expenditure like cost of goods sold or consumption of materials fits into section 37(1). Take another example, salaries, wages, or those kind of expenses. Are those expenses covered by section 30 to 36? The answer is no. We did not have any reference to salary, wages, etc. It's not a capital expenditure. It is not a personal expenditure. It is incurred during the previous year. The purpose is for business and it is not prohibited by law. So expenses like salary, wages will be covered under section 30 to 36. If you refer to rent, then the rent will not come under 37(1) because rent is already covered by earlier section, that is section 30. Similarly, repairs of assets, etc. is already covered by earlier section, so it will not fall over here. Some of the items like interest, contribution to welfare funds, bad debts, etc. are already covered by earlier section, so it will not come over here. But expenses like travel, conveyance, telephone expenses, all of them will be covered under section 32, will not be covered under section 30 to 36. So telephone expenses, internet related expenses, business travel, conveyance, car expenses, these are some printing and stationery. Okay, these are some of the examples where the deduction will be available under section 37(1). So if you see your P&L account, you will realize that there are several other items of expenditure which are not covered by section 30 to 36. And those items of expenditure, if they meet all these conditions, can be claimed as a deduction under these provisions. Then there are certain losses which are deductible and certain losses which are not deductible. The losses which are related to the business and which are not capital losses, which are revenue losses, are eligible for deduction. For example, there is a loss of stock. Stock is a current asset. There is a loss of stock, either due to fire or maybe due to flood or some kind of a theft, etc. Now this loss is a revenue loss. So this loss will be available as a deduction over here. But if there is a destruction of your plant and machinery due to fire, flood, etc., it is a capital loss and that cannot be claimed as a deduction under section 37(1). Another example is there is a theft in your factory premises and cash is also stolen. The cash which was there in cash box was also stolen by the person, and there is a loss. Now this loss is also a revenue loss and that will be deductible under section 37(1). So losses which are incidental to business, losses which are revenue in nature, are allowed as deduction, whereas capital losses or losses which are not connected with the business or profession will not be allowed as a deduction under section 37(1). Then there are certain penalties which are deductible under section 37(1), while some of them are not deductible. Which are not deductible? The penalties which are paid for non-compliance with law are not available as a deduction under section 37(1). Sometimes there is a non-compliance with law, and for non-complying with the law, there is a penalty levied. So if the business entity pays that penalty, which is for not following the legal provisions, that penalty cannot be claimed as a deduction. But suppose there are some penalties which are arising from your normal business or profession, then those will be allowed as deduction. For example, a business entity has entered into a contract or an agreement with its supplier. And the contract says that if there is a delay in supply of these goods, then there will be a penalty. If there is a delay in supply of goods, then the penalty will have to be paid for. So in that case, what happens? In that case, if there is a delay and if the penalty is paid, that is in the nature of contractual obligation. That penalty is paid in accordance with the business agreement, and such penalty paid to the customer will be available as a deduction. Suppose some equipment is supplied by a business entity which is faulty, and therefore the customer claims some damages or those kind of amounts from you, and those penal payments will also be allowed as a deduction because that is also arising from your contractual obligations. But otherwise, the penalties which are paid for non-compliance with law cannot be considered as a deductible expenditure. Okay, so these are the finer points that one need to take into account when one claims a deduction under section 37(1). Is there any query about what we discussed so far under 37(1)? Sorry.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. We will have few more examples in the next slide. So we will have a general list of deductible expenses. Annual day celebrations. In many offices or establishments, you may have this celebration of your foundation day or annual day or those kind of things. Those are the expenses which will be considered under section 37(1). What I am referring over here are some of the offbeat expenses. Okay, not the regular expenses. Regular expenses in P&L account, most of you know. I am trying to cover some of the expenses which are little odd in nature. So you should know that these are also available as a deduction. Then foreign travel for collaborations. If company executives, company representatives travel abroad for the purpose of entering into collaborations, etc. I'm sorry. That will be allowed as deduction. Then puja expenses on festive occasions. On festive occasions like Dashera or even Diwali, there is a practice of performing puja in business establishments, and some customary expenses are incurred for this. Those are deductible under section 37(1). If you take any pollution control measures in accordance with the requirements, and then if you incur for expenditure for that, that will be allowed as deduction. Staff welfare expenses. For example, you provide tea, coffee during the working hours, or if the company provides subsidized lunch facility to its employees, then such staff welfare expenses will be also deductible. Staff training. If the business entity incurs any expenditure to provide any kind of training for the staff, or if they attend seminars, if they attend conferences, and that is sponsored by the business entity, by the employer, such expenses are also allowed as deduction. Legal expenses incurred by the entity, that is also one of the deductible expenditure. Compensation for termination of employment. Whenever the company terminates any employees, or if it is paying VRS compensation, voluntary retirement scheme compensation, or retrenchment compensation on the removal of the employees, that will be allowed as deduction. Sports events. Many a times there is a practice to hold sports events or entertainment events once in a year or so for the employee. It's one of the employee welfare measure, and such sports events, etc., which are organized by the employer, if the expenditure is incurred on that annual expenditure, that will be allowed as a deduction. Demurrage. Demurrage is a payment paid to a transporter because you did not pick up the goods in time from the transporter. The goods have arrived. Whatever you have purchased in your name, the goods have already arrived and they are lying in docks like BPT, MBPT, Mumbai Port Trust docks, or they are lying with the transporter, or they are lying with the railway authorities. Somebody has sent the goods to you and these are yet to be collected from either port trust or a transporter or railways, etc. So what they do, if you don't collect it in time, they ask you to pay some extra charge, and that is called as demurrage. That is also allowed as a deduction. If you pay any telephone or telex deposit, okay, under certain circumstances, it was allowed as deduction. It was called as Own Your Telephone Scheme, OIT scheme. Now that those schemes are not there, but this was one of the old case where telephone deposit or telex deposit, there used to be something called as Own Your Telephone Scheme, OIT scheme, where the telephones were installed on a preferential basis. I'm talking of landline number 25 years back story. Then telex, which is now completely outdated kind of communications method. So even telex facility deposits were taken and those were allowed as deduction. Trading losses. If you have any trading losses arising from your business or profession, those are also allowed as deduction. Then which are the non-deductible expenses? Penalties for non-compliance with law. If you don't comply with the law, just now I told you, then the penalties are not available as a deduction. Travel related to new business. If you're planning to start a new business, etc., and it may or may not come through. So travel related to such business is a pre-commencement kind of a expenditure. So that is not deductible. Then traveling related to purchase of machinery. This is usually a capital expenditure. So you can't claim as a revenue expenditure in this section. Acquiring tenancy rights. If you acquire tenancy rights and make some payment for that, that is also not a revenue expenditure deductible under section 37(1). Then contribution for road construction. Sometimes in a factory area, the road condition is not good. So what the municipal corporation or the local authority does, they ask for the contribution for construction of road up to the factory building or up to the factory gates, and that is collected from various businessmen and then they construct the road. Such contributions are not allowable as a deduction. Statutory fees for increasing capital. In case of companies, if you increase the share capital, authorized capital, you have to pay some fees to the registrar of companies. So such fees are not allowed as a deduction. If you incur any expenditure on shifting of plant and machinery, then even that expenditure is not a deductible expenditure under section 37(1). So apart from this, most of the items in P&L account, if you look into those items, if they satisfy the condition laid down by section 37(1), those 6 conditions or so, what we discussed, then all those expenses will be squarely allowed as deduction, will be fully allowed as deduction under section 37(1). Is a framework of 37(1) clear to each one of you? Can we go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This 40B is not there in your syllabus, so I'll skip this slide. Okay, earlier it was there. Then we come to what is called as disallowances. Now, so far, whatever things we were discussing are concerned with the deductions or allowances. In income tax, we also have what is called as disallowances. In a sense, expenditure is not allowed as a deduction. So which are these items of expenditure which are not allowed as deduction that we will have to look at now. The concerned provisions are spread between section 37 to section 40. Some of the selected sections governed by syllabus we will briefly refer to. One is 37(2)(b), which relates to disallowance of advertisement. If you incur any expenditure on advertisement in any publication of a political party, publication or brochure of a political party, then it is not allowed as deduction. If it is any other advertisement, yes, it will be allowed as deduction. For example, you advertise a new product which you have in the market, because you have vacancies to fill up. You advertise because you are inviting some tenders. You advertise because of some other legal requirements, like companies have to publish their annual results or quarterly results. All these advertisements are allowed as deduction. That expenditure is allowed as deduction. What is not allowed is only if the advertisement is released in a publication of a political party, then that will not be allowed as a deduction. Then section 40(a)(1), it relates to certain payments to a non-resident person. If you are making a payment of interest, royalty, fees for technical services, FTS is fees for technical services, or any other sums to a non-resident person, then this is subject to deduction of income tax at source, payment of such income tax to the government, and following the appropriate procedure. If the assessee has failed to deduct the income tax at source, or having deducted has failed to pay it to the government, deposit it with the government authorities, then such expenditure of interest, royalty, etc., where the payment is paid to a non-resident, made to a non-resident, is not allowed as a deduction. The next is section 40(a)(1)(a), payment of interest, commission, rent, contract charges, royalty, fee, technical service, and certain other specified sums to a resident person. Whenever these amounts are paid to a resident, again there is a requirement of deduction of tax at source, payment of tax to the government, and certain prescribed procedure to be followed. So if the assessee has failed to do that, then such expenditure will not be allowed as a deduction. So unless and until you comply with the law regarding deduction of tax at source and payment of taxes to the government, these expenses. But there is an enabling provision here. Enabling provision in the sense, suppose you are looking at financial year 1920, and in financial year 1920, you have made some payment which is either to a non-resident person or to a resident person as per the section what we are discussing, like payment of interest, commission, or fees for technical services or royalty, etc. But the assessee has failed to deduct the tax at source and pay it to the government. So for the financial year 1920, when you compute the taxable income of the assessee, these expenses will not be allowed as a deduction. Afterwards, after financial year 1920, suppose the assessee makes the payment of tax to the government, deposits that deduction of tax related payments to the government. Then in that financial year, once he complies with the law, he will be allowed to claim a deduction. So it is not a permanent loss of deduction. It will only get shifted from one year to another. If in the year in which the expenditure is incurred, you have not complied with the law, you will not be allowed to claim the deduction. In the subsequent year, for the same expenditure which was disallowed earlier, you can claim the deduction provided you have complied with the relevant provisions of law. Then next is section 48(2), which disallows the deduction of any payment in the nature of income tax. Actually, the words used are tax on profits. So any amount which is paid as tax on your profits, which is basically income tax, is not allowed as a deduction. No other conditions. Just remember that income tax is not allowed as a deduction. Similarly, any payment of wealth tax is also not allowed as a deduction. Then 48(3), salary to a person outside India or a non-resident in India without deduction of tax at source. So just like other payments, when you are making a payment to a non-resident person or a person outside India for the purpose of salary, again there is a requirement of deduction of tax at source. If that is not followed, then that payment will not be allowed as a deduction. That salary will not be considered as a deductible expenditure for the assessee. Then section 48(2), payments to related parties. Whenever the payments are made, expenditure is incurred and the payment is made to related parties. What is a related party is provided in the section. So if you make any expenditure and the payment for that is made to a related party, if it is reasonable, having regard to the business conditions, the nature of services, the market conditions, the caliber of the party, the normal business carried on by the party, etc., then you don't consider the disallowance. But if it is unreasonable or excessive, then such payment will not be allowed as deduction. So 48(2) does not disallow every payment. Payment to related parties are allowed as long as they are reasonable and not excessive. If they are unreasonable, having regard to the market value of the services or market value of the goods, quality of the goods supplied or quality of services provided, for any reason if these are unreasonable, then such unreasonable portion has to be disallowed under the provisions of 48(3). So payment to related parties, not that every payment can be disallowed, only those payments which are unreasonable or excessive may be disallowed under these provisions. Who are the related parties? In case of a proprietor, his spouse, his children, brothers, sisters, etc., they are considered, or parents, they are considered as related parties. In case of a HUF, the members of HUF or Karta or any other entities where HUF is interested as a owner, etc., those are related parties. In case of a firm, its partners are related parties, or any other companies in which these partners are interested or the firm is having a stake, then those entities are called as related parties. In case of a company, directors, shareholders are related parties. Business interest in some other entities also, then those business entities are also considered as related parties. So payment to all these parties will come under a scanner by virtue of section 48(2). And if it is unreasonable or excessive, it will be disallowed in working of tax liabilities. Then 48(3) disallows payment exceeding ₹10,000 in cash in certain cases. Whenever the assessee makes any payment which is exceeding ₹10,000 and which is made otherwise than by a crossed account paid check or a demand draft, then such payment is disallowed. So basically, this is to cross check that cash payments are not made, because many a time these cash payments are used to book the bogus expenditure, and therefore, in order to check the payment of bogus expenditure, etc., this provision has been provided. However, it excludes certain expenditure items, and even if the payment is more than 10,000 in cash, it will be allowed as deduction. For example, the days on which the banking facilities are not available for some reason, or in case of rural area where you have to purchase agricultural produce and the payment cannot be made by checks, etc., and therefore you have to make the payment in cash, then such payments will be allowed as deduction on exceptional basis. But otherwise, by and large, any payment exceeding ₹10,000 otherwise than by a crossed account paid check, that means a bearer check, is also not acceptable, or a demand draft is not allowed as a deduction. Then section 40A7 deals with disallowance for provision for gratuity. Any provision for gratuity is not allowed as a deduction. So if you simply make a provision for gratuity, which is a book entry, it is not allowed as deduction. However, if you make a provision for gratuity for a contribution which is actually payable to the gratuity fund, approved gratuity fund, that will be allowed as a deduction subject to the provisions of section 43B. So subject to those provisions, you can claim the deduction for provision for gratuity, but otherwise, simple provision for gratuity, which is a book entry, there is no corresponding funding for that, then that will not be allowed as a deduction. Are you clear about these disallowances? Any clarity required so far? Yes, any more clarification required about so far? Okay. Then we come to one more disallowance, and this is a disallowance under section 43B, a very important condition. Okay, this 43B disallowance applies to certain types of payments. Which are the payments? First payment is duties and taxes. Any tax, duty, cess or fees under a law. So this will cover items like goods and services tax, taxes payable to local authorities. In the earlier days, it used to cover service tax, sales tax, value added tax, and those kind of payments. So all these are duties and taxes payable to the government or the local authority. So these payments are covered. It covers contribution to welfare funds, like a contribution to provident fund, gratuity fund, any other similar superannuation or retirement benefit fund is also covered. It covers bonus and commission payable to the employees. So if you have any bonus or commission which needs to be paid to the employees, which is outstanding, that will be covered by 43B. It applies to leave encashment. If you are liable to pay any leave encashment to the employees, then that leave encashment will also be covered. Any payment of gratuity is also covered under section 43B. If you are liable to pay any interest on a loan which is taken from a bank or a financial institution or from a non-banking financial company, NBFC, which is accepting deposits, etc., and is permitted to do so, then such interest is also covered under section 43B. And lastly, any amount payable to Indian Railways for the use of railway assets, for example, rentals for wagons or those kind of assets. Okay, so these are the expenditure items which are covered under section 43B. These are the items of expenses which are related covered by 43B. Now, what is the provision of 43B? 43B says if these payments are outstanding on the last day of the financial year. I repeat the condition. If these payments are outstanding on the last day of the financial year, and if these are paid before the due date of submission of income tax return, then these expenses will be allowed as a deduction. So if any of these payments, any of these expenses rather, are outstanding when on the last day of financial year. So in our case, as our previous year is 1920. So what we have to check is whether on 31st March 2020, any of these expenses are outstanding as payables. If so, what we need to check whether these are paid before the due date prescribed for submission of income tax return. If these are paid before due date for submission of income tax return, it will be allowed as a deduction. But if you fail to make the payment before the due date of income tax return, then it will not be allowed as a deduction for that particular financial year. So if these payments, so we are not referring to the payments made during the year, number one. We are referring to the expenses of this nature which are outstanding at the end of the year, which are outstanding on 31st March. And if these are outstanding on 31st March, if these are actually paid before the due date of submission of income tax return, then there is no difficulty. You are fully allowed to claim these expenses as a deduction. But if one fails to do that, if the amounts are not paid before that due date, then it will not be available as a deduction. Then what will be the consequences if it is paid after the due date. Let's take an example, financial year 1920, some of these items, like for example, gratuity is payable to an employee on 31st March 2020. Currently, the extended due dates of filing of IT return are 30th November 2020. So if the gratuity which is outstanding on 31st March 2020 is paid before 30th November 2020, then there is no disallowance. But suppose this gratuity is paid in, let's say, January 21, and assuming that the date is not extended, because we may have extension of date now. Okay, so assuming that the date is still 30th November and the gratuity is paid in the month of Jan 2021, then for financial year 1920, this gratuity will not be allowed as a deduction. Number one. But will you lose the deduction forever? The answer is no. In Jan 21, you have paid the amount of gratuity, so it was disallowed for financial year 1920, but it will be allowed as a deduction for financial year 2020-21. So in the year in which it is paid, you can still claim the deduction. So consequences if paid after due date of IT return is, if at all it is paid, then in the year of payment, in the financial year in which it has been paid, you can still claim a deduction. So it is not a permanent disallowance. Okay, if it is outstanding and unpaid, not paid before due date of IT return, you cannot claim a deduction. Subsequently, if it is paid, you can claim the deduction of these expenses. Are you clear about section 43B? Yes, any more examples on this? Okay. So with that, I think what we are through is with the basic framework of income from business or profession, which is covered by your syllabus. Couple of things we need to discuss. Okay, so in the next lecture, we will discuss those two things, and then we can start with the sums based on first three heads of income. That is income from salary, income from house property, and income from business. A combination of these three heads of income, we can start working on the problems and solutions. Now, before we start working on the problems and solutions, we will also discuss what is the methodology to compute the income from business or profession. So with the given P&L account, or with the given income and expenditure account, or with the given receipts and payments account, how do we work on the computation of income from business or profession? That is one more aspect that we have to discuss. So we will discuss that in the next lecture, and then we will start with the problems and solutions. Any other clarification required? I'll stop the recording and then we can discuss. Okay, let me stop it.